Saints fans and who-dats from all over the world. It's time for the Bayou Blitz, y'all. With your hosts, Bob Rose and Kyle T.
We are happy to welcome back to the Bayou Blitz, ladies and gentlemen, former Saints and Rams great and Purdue University icon, quarterback Jim Everett. How's it going tonight, Jim?
Bob, it's going great. You know, I'm pretty happy with what's going on. You know, what's transpiring in the NFL. We got our teams winning. Saints are doing a great job. With some of the adversity, and I really think that's speaks volumes to the general manager. I think it's easy for any team to line up 22 good guys, but to have 53 in depth and stuff like that, I think really speaks to the quality of the organization.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I not only general manager Mickey Loomis, who, like you pointed out, he doesn't get nearly enough credit for basically being the architect of this deep and talented team. But a lot of people think that this is perhaps Coach Sean Payton's finest job to date. This team has really taken on the mantra of next man up and embraced it.
Yeah, and I think that combination that you talk about, having a general manager and have a coach in recognition of what's going on and be able to adjust the game plan, adjust the talent. But if you look at the roster, from 1 to 53, there's no doubt that I think the Saints are, top 3 team in the league as far as being able to make sure that there's, competition at from their starter all the way to their backup. And, let me correct myself. There was a point when I really thought when they drafted Davenport that I was, I thought Lamar Jackson was going to be the guy. And I really thought that was be the position to have behind Brees. It's unfortunate he got hurt, and I know Bridgewater maybe had that first game that it was a little bit hesitant on, but since then, I think Davenport's picked up his game. I think Bridgewater's sure done a nice job. Murray's done a good job in the backfield for Kamara. So I really like what they've done. And I maybe I'll correct myself from saying, hey, what about Lamar? But, I did bring up that point, and I guess we all are kind of DIY GMs, but, I think Mickey's really done a good job.
Yeah, and I remember you saying even on this show before that you were a little bit surprised when the Saints moved up in the 2018 draft that they didn't grab Lamar. And look, he's playing lights out in Baltimore, so they made the right move for them too. But back to what you were saying about Bridgewater, what are a couple of the things that you see that's making him so successful?
Well, I think what they're doing is just sticking to a game plan and not asking him to be Drew Brees. I think, I look one of the stats about, Michael Thomas is at wide receiver. His numbers are very similar to when Drew's coming back. I think the difference is, Drew's maybe will reach out to the touchdowns a few more times. And I think he has that trust that I think Bridgewater's moving that way. But I think you're seeing a competent quarterback. You see other teams in the league, they lose their starting quarterback, and they really struggle unless they, just hit with some, young rookie stud, maybe with Jacksonville or whatever. But I really think that, he's done a really good job. He's a pro's pro, and it's really nice to see. And number one, I really like to see him come back from that knee injury, which was devastating. And so I'm kind of rooting for him. But anyways, I just wanted to make sure I corrected myself saying, I'm not down on Bridgewater. I just really high on Lamar when I brought that up earlier. But I could totally see helping Cam over there on that defense. He may not get all the sack numbers that Cam is doing, but he's sure putting on a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and yourself as a quarterback having to face pass rushing teams with a bookend pass rushers such as Davenport and Cam. They're really tough to defend unless you have a couple of all-pro caliber tackles. You were fortunate enough to have that, as do the Saints right now in Armstead and Ramczyk, who have shut down some of the best pass rushers in the game.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the whole level, and I really see their defense really stepped up when when Drew got hurt, and I really think that having defenses carrying you go back to the Jim Mora days. I really think that can, get you to the dance. I don't think it wins the dance unless your name's Trent Dilfer. But anyways, I think that, that's one thing about championship teams. They don't have lackluster defenses, and so they've got that. It looks like Drew's going to be back soon, and I think that'll be an uptick for their offense even more. And it's unfortunate he got hurt, but that's part of the game is, things happen, and it's a contact sport.
Well, and you mentioned Drew coming back, and one of the main debatable topics up and around Saints country right now is, Drew came back to practice on a limited basis today, and of course he's recovering from that thumb on his throwing hand. Now you've been in this situation, this similar situation. He's a 40-year-old quarterback. If you're him, what's your mindset? You're now coming back from an injury to your throwing hand. You've been out, I think, you've missed for the better part of 6 games. What's your mindset as you go through recovery?
Well, if I know Drew well enough, I know physically, even though he has his arm or hand hurt, I know physically he stayed in good shape. I mean, that's just him. He's a freak like that. So I wouldn't worry about the physical part with him. The other part was, I think everybody, look at Adrian Peterson over with Washington, has a high ankle sprain, and he thinks that he can play this week. I think some of the NFL guys, including myself, sometimes have a little bit of Superman mentality, saying I could still do this. That's how they got to where they are. But the fact is, maybe he's 79%, not 99%, and you don't want to put your team in a position where maybe 79% isn't enough to get that victory. And that's hard. That's a hard thing to check your ego at the door. I think you just make sure that, if he drops the ball or anything like that, that could hurt the team. I don't think you want to put your team in a type of position. So I think it would be wise for him to make sure that he's fully functioning. I know he's going to be football ready. And I'm just glad he has a chance to come back.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, you mentioned how competitive you are, and that competitiveness can sometimes get in your own way, because obviously you're a warrior. You want to be out there with your teammates. You want to be out there competing, not only for yourself but for them. So now you put yourself in the position of Coach Sean Payton, who's going to have the ultimate say-so on whether Drew plays, say, this Sunday or not. So you're Coach Payton, and admittedly, you and I are outsiders, so we don't know how, whether Drew is indeed 79% or 99%. Right. So based off of what we know, if you were Coach Payton, would you sit Drew for this Arizona game too, and then bring him back after the bye for the November 10th Atlanta game, or would you let him go this Sunday?
No, absolutely. I would give him 2 more weeks. We're talking about a 40-year-old body. We're not talking about a 25. I'm sure Drew is going to lobby to play. But, I think, again, when it comes down, coach is going to see what kind of zip he has on the ball, what he can do. How's it feel to take a snap from the center because the ball comes up and jars your hand a little bit. There's a bunch of little small nuances that go on. But if I could buy 2 weeks, hopefully get that win against Arizona and have, my starting quarterback come up 2 weeks from now, I think that's really optimal. I would put odds in favor that it'll be the Atlanta game that he comes back, not this one.
Yeah, I'm definitely in your corner. Yeah. Now, let's look at the rest of the Saints team now. When you came up with the Rams, and your first year with them was 1986, they turned around and traded Eric Dickerson, an elite Hall of Fame running back, in 1987. Now, obviously, we're talking about a different situation than, say, a Drew Brees going out injured, because we know Drew's coming back. But nonetheless, you now had to step into that huddle. The top player is gone, and you are thrust into that leadership role. And I know you had Jackie Slater and a couple other leaders on that team too. What do you guys say to your teammates in that situation to kind of bring everybody together?
Well, any team that gets put together, the final 53 guys or in your practice squad guys, that's your team. And if management, like they did with Sanu, moved him from Atlanta over to New England, or Jalen Ramsey, the guys in Jacksonville, how they're feeling. Management has to run a business, and they know financially what works, what they can do, contract stuff. And as a player, you don't have control of that. So getting guys traded, while it's shocking, it's part of the business. And, some teams may be having to deal with salary cap issues. Some teams may be worried about, can they re-sign them next year? And if so, how many millions is it going to take from the cap? So, there's a bunch of complex things, but as a teammate, you always want the best players. Having a guy like Eric Dickerson, I can tell you this was a game changer. And then when you change somebody for draft picks, doesn't mean those draft picks are the same Hall of Fame type guy that you're going to get in return. I can tell you with the Rams experience, it wasn't. And I'm not pointing fingers about this or that, but if you're going to get rid of a Hall of Famer, maybe strike a guy that at least, can be a Pro Bowler. But we had 6 picks and we pretty much struck out on all of them. And so picks turn into bodies. And so that was the thing when I can go back with the Rams, for example, trading for Jalen Ramsey. They gave up 2 firsts. Well, those are 2 question marks. We know Jalen can play. He shows it. And he's one of the best in the league. And to have access to that guy, I think the Rams pick 20 to pick whatever, 32, whatever. I don't think that type of cornerback is available. So to be able to give 2 to make sure you got a guy that is Pro Bowl capable is probably a pretty fair price.
Yeah, and I think I think we know and we've seen how aggressive the Rams front office has been to build that team around quarterback Jared Goff and for Coach Sean McVay. So obviously, a lot of teams would have loved to pull the trigger on a deal for Ramsey. But tell us what went into the decision to trade Marcus Peters in conjunction with that.
Well, again, this is not really inside information. This is my assessment of it. Marcus Peters is a fine corner. He's a good person too. He really helped with a bunch of charities here in LA. He's well liked by his teammates. He's really a good guy. I think it came down to philosophical. Wade Phillips likes to play, some gambling defenses. And I think that when you do that, when you're bringing 5, 6, 7 guys for pressure, or at least changing up to be able to do so, you need a shutdown corner. Marcus is more of a zone corner, and he played that in Kansas City, and he guesses a lot, and he guesses right, and he has the most picks of any DB, I think. And you look the first game he played for Baltimore, he did a pick 6. So, yeah. But you've got to ask Marcus to play within a zone scheme. What Wade likes to do is bring some of his man scheme stuff, and he was limited with that. And I think you saw that with the New Orleans game last year when Thomas just took advantage of Peters on a particular blitz. And I think Wade started getting in a position to saying, well, I can't really run the defense I want, so I've got to play around Marcus Peters. Well, they just said, you know what, let's just go get that corner that he wants, kind of like the Talib type corner, and be able to run my full set of arsenal. And I think that's the stuff that the Rams want to do, or at least Wade does.
Staying with the Rams, if we could, for a minute, and I know obviously this is a Saints-related show, but I think it's also safe to say that the Saints-Rams rivalry from the 70s, 80s, and 90s is more than renewed. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And, the cool part about it is I get to play for both teams, and I get to cheer for both teams. And I really get pulled when they play each other. So Bob, I've told you this before, I root for both the offense. Because I love both the teams, and that's just the way it is. So, I get to follow the Saints. It's great to see the rivalry, that they're both competitive right now, and I just think that's cool. But one of the surprise thing for the NFC is seeing the 49ers be so successful, and I dislike that.
I think everybody that's ever been associated with the Rams or Saints would agree with you on that. I know I still have nightmares.
Yeah. Watching Atlanta right now, I'm good with that. But as a 49ers, I'm like, oh God, that just sets a fire in me.
You mentioned the Rams offense and how you root for them and follow them. The LA offense has come under a lot of scrutiny, recently. What do you see as being some of their difficulties right now?
Well, the first thing is their offensive line. I don't think they enjoy the offensive line that the New Orleans Saints has and what they've been able to produce. Going into the season, we got a new center, a brand new left guard, and and our right guard was new last year. And so I think the interior part was, we talked a bunch about it in the preseason about, how's the chemistry going to be? And so far it's been horrid. I mean, I think they were ranked maybe one of the bottom two offensive lines. Doesn't mean that defines them. It just means they have to grow. And I think that's what they're at. And I think every team is like that. It's like every year it's like a new chemistry set. And this just hadn't popped for them. So I know we changed out our left guard. Let's talk about some other positions. I think Coach Cromer does a really good job with the offensive line. We traded for Corbin from Cleveland, which I don't know if it's a good thing, because if he's not starting for Cleveland, because Cleveland has one of the bottom offensive lines too, but hopefully he's a good talent and Cromer sees something in him that he can get the most out of him, and he does. But they've got a lot of growth to do, and I think that's some of the problems about Jared's been back there, and I just don't think that he has the trust and he hasn't had the time to do the stuff that they do.
And is that what basically happens? I mean, certain quarterbacks, and we've actually heard that about Goff recently, is that he's gun shy or whatever. I'm sure you've heard the criticisms too. Is that what it is though? He realizes that he can't have that trust in the offensive line in front of him right now. So that clock that's in all of you quarterbacks' heads is now all of a sudden cut in half as far as when I have to get rid of the ball.
Well, I mean, I guess for everyday living, if you have a car that's 15 years old and has been giving you problems, and you have to get in that car and you have a road trip, you have in the back of your mind that worry that you might not make it. And it's just extra energy used. And the same thing with quarterbacks. If he's getting behind that brand new car and he's not worried one bit about it making it its destination. But you get behind a 15, 20-year-old car and you've had problems with it. You're worried, you're anxious, all those types of feelings. And I'm just trying to put it in a layman's term that someone can understand that it's just wasted energy. But I can also tell you this, if you look at the stats, he's been hit way more times this year than he was the previous years. So it makes a difference. You look at Baker Mayfield. He's playing behind a line that's makeshift and, just really having a tough time with it. And I'm just, let's go back to the New Orleans with Peyton. Being a Bill Parcells type guy, Bill always wanted to win with the bigs. And I think that's what you see New Orleans doing, is they make sure they have good quality bigs. If you're going to win that battle up front, then you have average guys or more average guys behind them being successful. I take, for example, Phil Simms. I'm not calling him average. I mean, I'm just saying maybe not as talented as a John Elway or Dan Marino, but can still win Super Bowls.
Do you still consider the Rams a legitimate Super Bowl contender?
Not right now. Not right now. I think if they improve, like, for example, if I'm looking at the New Orleans, I think the tight ends have to improve for New Orleans. I mean, they just got to get productivity. I think that's one of the things for New Orleans to be, they've got to find that rhythm with the tight end position to make sure that it's an asset for them.
And that is a great point too. And I'd actually like to start on the Saints offensive side of the ball, given what you just said. If you are an opposing defensive coordinator, we know what the Saints have up front on the offensive line, how efficient Bridgewater is playing, and you mentioned Michael Thomas. How would you attack this offense?
Good question. I would probably try to make Bridgewater make quick decisions. Probably some pressure. I make sure that I have coverage on Thomas. I don't think the other receivers scare me. I don't think the tight ends scare me. If Kamara's in there, he scares me. I know he's been on and off, but I think they've been doing a good job of mixing it up. But I would probably think pressure as long as I don't leave Thomas exposing to just gash me.
And I wanted to ask you about Thomas too. When you were in the NFL, you played with some terrific wide receivers. You had Flipper Anderson and Henry Ellerden in Los Angeles. You had our friend Quinn Early and Michael Haynes and a great tight end and Irv Smith in New Orleans. The Saints are playing
and Wesley Walls as well.
Walls absolutely
was an A+ tight end. I mean, he was fabulous.
But you're going into a matchup like what Michael Thomas has against Patrick Peterson this Sunday for Arizona. When your top guy was facing a shutdown guy like that, would you make a conscious effort to spread the ball around a little bit more, or would you just go in full bore with what your game plan usually is?
Well, the DBs, everyone's studying film equally. And they're not going to be someone's not going to come in the game prepared knowing what Mike's routes are. I mean, Peterson's going to know, when his body does this, he likes to break out. When his body does this, he goes. So one of the things I would probably do, especially on a very aggressive corner like that, is make sure that when we do get those pressures that we have some double moves so that our tendencies aren't the same. Meaning, if we do slants or if we do this, then we do a slant and go. We do a sluggo and see if we can hit yard on them. That's what we did with Deion Sanders. And I'm not saying it works all the time, but I'm saying these guys that like to be very aggressive corners and believe in themselves, let them believe you're running one route and run another one. But it takes some new stuff to do that. It takes some time and it takes some trust. I'm not saying it's going to be there because those guys are great athletes. But if you do get them to jump, if you can do that, that is one way to take advantage of their aggressiveness.
And that is definitely, or would be a definite testimony to the chemistry between you as the quarterback and your receivers. Is that understated throughout the league? When us as fans, we say, well, we think our team should trade for this receiver, or our team should trade for that receiver. It's not really that easy, though, is it? It takes time to build up some chemistry with your pass targets.
Oh, gosh. Well, if anyone's ever traveled to a foreign country and you just go to that country, you have to speak their language. No one's fluent. So unless you're traded to a team that you've run that offense before, or unless you're traded to a team that offensive coordinator, you've been in that system, no, you've got to come in and depending on the type, some could be West Coast, some could be, whatever offense you're looking at. The Arizona offense probably wouldn't be common to any of them, with being that air raid type offense. So, yeah, there's a steep learning curve for mid-season trades. It takes time, and I don't think unless you're on the defensive side of the ball, I think it's a little easier on that type of trade, being that, let's go back to Ramsey. He's a shutdown corner. You do what you do. There's times when you play zones, you got to know the calls. That's a little bit easier than knowing the nuances of, hey, if I'm the receiver, I'm the slot, or I'm outside, and we've got this combination that, it's new language. Or on this, I got to know I got to side adjust if this particular guy comes. There's a lot more to really know on the coordination side, especially for offense.
And that's a great point. I think and I agree with you. I think Jalen Ramsey is going to be really successful in Wade Phillips' system. You mentioned Marcus Peters had a pick six last week for Baltimore. Even Eli Apple, when New Orleans made the deal for him last year, he instantly transformed their defense. So I don't think that there's any question that at least it looks like. I'm not going to pretend I understand, but you certainly do. That it might be easier to step in on the defensive side of the ball.
No, if you're running a similar scheme too, Kevin Green was a 3-4 linebacker. If he goes to a 4-3 defense, he's got to learn conceptually a bunch of different things. So if you go to a similar scheme for a defense, yeah, life could be easier. I think the toughest job, if we want to be dialed down in this a little bit, would probably be one of the linebackers, either inside or out, especially inside. Because you have so many responsibilities, and with offenses changing, the shifts, and this and that, and calling that, I think would be a little bit more difficult in the in-season trade than, say, a cornerback or a defensive end.
And Jim, I asked you how you would attack the New Orleans offense if you were coming in as a defensive coordinator. But now I'd like to put you back in at quarterback. How are you going to attack this New Orleans defense if you're taking the field against them this Sunday?
Well, I think one of the things that we'd look at is on that type of thing is they've got a really good pass rush, and one of the things that you can help stymie a pass rush is run right at them. So my game plan would be running the ball right at Cam. I'm not saying it's going to be successful, but I'd like to have my offensive guys be able to tee off on him rather than getting teed off. Cam teeing off on you. So get some double teams, get them, beat them up a little physically. Anything you can do to try to get them on their heels. So, a run game would be critical. I'm not saying that Arizona provides that. I'm just saying that would be my particular thing that I'd want to do.
Now, Jim, you're certainly no stranger to facing great defenses when lining up against the Saints. And obviously, when anybody talks about New Orleans and defense, the first words out of their mouth is usually the Dome Patrol. How would and you guys had a terrific offense when you were in Los Angeles. But what was usually your game plan against that group of Saints defenders then?
Survive. I would say collectively in a 3-4 defense, probably four of the best linebackers all together that you ever had to face. So it's not like you're facing Lawrence Taylor. And I know Carl Banks was over there, but you want to turn your protection to Lawrence Taylor, or make sure you chip them and do all these different things. But what you got now with the Saints, you got to chip Cam, you got to chip Davenport, and you got to take care of both sides, and that's what makes it so explosive. But when you have four linebackers, like what the Dome Patrol have, it just wreaks havoc on what you can do. You got to stay balanced. You can't cheat. You gotta make sure these guys coming in. But one of the things that we always thought we could do is, if we had time to get to their secondary, we think we could win that battle. But we just never had time, unless you talk about the overtime game. Well, I think we just exhausted the pass rush. But before that, they just beat you purple.
As a quarterback, and you've had both, if you were forced, if someone put the proverbial gun to your head and they said, Jim Everett, we're going to allow you a choice. You can have a great running game, or you can have a great defense. Which would you pick?
Defense. And that would be one thing I've never experienced. I think the highest rated defense I ever played for was 17. So all my career of 12 years in the NFL, I think the highest ranked defense we had was 17, and we actually did really well. Most like, other than that, it was 20s and stuff like that. So I look at a guy like Tom Brady. I think one of the things that I know, he gets a lot of credit, and he takes care of the ball, and he really does a lot of good things. And their scheme that they use up there is very friendly. One thing that people don't realize, that defense is freaking brutally tough.
Yeah. And
that just takes a lot of pressure off your offense when we're good. Our guys can take care of it. I don't think that I ever had that luxury. So if you ask me, I would take that with 2 scoops.
You mentioned the Patriots, and I don't know how close attention you pay to the AFC, but is anyone, and obviously any given Sunday, we all know the saying, and it's so true, but is anyone in a position to knock off the Patriots in the AFC?
Well, I don't see it. Again, one of the teams, I don't think they're dominant every week, but the team that I like to watch is Baltimore. I think they have the outside. I think Kansas City's a different team without Mahomes, which goes back to our discussion of, where the Saints were. They had Drew Brees hurt, but Bridgewater stepped right in and did a very, very nice job, which I don't think the Kansas City has that luxury. And that speaks to, having depth on your team. So I don't think Kansas City's there, even though I like them. I don't think Kansas City has the defense to withstand beating them regularly. Not like New England defense. So at this point, no. I don't know how many points have been scored on New England's defense, but it hasn't been many, and it's been super impressive. So I'm not saying their opponents have been the best opponents of the league. I think difficulty has been easy for them, but still they're performing on a weekly basis up to Belichick's level, and it's impressive.
How important, going down the stretch of the season now, and certainly into the postseason, how important is postseason experience to an individual player and a team as a whole if you're going up against them?
I think it adds value. I don't think it wins games, but I think it adds value. It adds confidence. I think one of the things going into postseason is if you look at the season, and we always discuss this as different quarters. The first 4 games being the first quarter, the next 4 games being the second quarter, third and fourth. I think you want to see your team improving in the third. And I always thought the third quarter was kind of the toughest quarter, as far as staying focused. Some of your rookies are used to only 10 or 12 games for the whole season. Now we've got to play this and 4 more. So some of your younger guys just start losing the focus. And I don't think people think about that. But I think that you want to be in a position where you're ramping up in the third and fourth quarter. I think teams can do great. I think New England team that almost went, I think they were undefeated, but they lost in the playoffs. You want to be playing your best football in your fourth quarter. How you get that done each year in and year out is, coaching magic. But that's where you want to go because you want to take that confidence all the way through the playoffs.
Let me ask you one last question. I'll give you the opportunity to toot your own horn because obviously myself and there's so many people that were huge fans of you when you played.
Well, thanks.
Do you think? My pleasure. It was a pleasure watching you. Do you think about the Hall of Fame much? And do you believe that you should be in more heavy consideration than you have been?
I've had that discussion, and I can tell you my feelings on this. When I was a kid growing up, I always wanted to be in the NFL, and I thought, gosh, it would be good. I watched my guys, Lenny Dawson, Terry Bradshaw, Roger Staubach. I go, I want to be like those guys. And I had the opportunity to play in the dance and be there for 12 years. I don't know. I think for quarterbacks, there's so much focus on Super Bowls as being able to define who you are. But I can look at guys like Archie Manning, Burt Jones, some other guys that were fabulous quarterbacks, did not play on quality teams that would be Super Bowl worthy. And it's unfortunate, but there's some good players on these teams that aren't on teams that are Super Bowl quality. And I don't think that I came close, but I'm not. So what I said, going back when I was a kid, I didn't dream about being in the Hall of Fame. I dreamed about being in the NFL. And the fact that I got to play, and I got to play the best I could and left everything out on the field, then I'm not the judge. I'm not part of the popularity contest. What's in vogue? What's this? Compared this to that. I just know I was the best Jim Everett I could be. And if that's worthy, fantastic. If it's not, I'm good with that. But I'm not going to go lobby for it because it does take marketing. And each one of these guys you see going to the Hall of Fame have lobbied. I know Roman Gabriel, probably Hall of Fame worthy, but he is lobbying hard. His whole crew. Is that a task you want to do? It's a full-time gig because you've got to convince everybody that that career is worthy. I really don't care to spend my energy that way.
Well, you got two guys that already has a say in the Hall of Fame committee, Eric Dickerson and Jackie Slater. I'll tweet them. I'll have them do some of that work for you because I've always thought you deserved to be in there, my friend.
Well, I believe Henry Ellard should be, no doubt. He's yes. By far. If I had to look at guys, I would probably say Jerry Rice if I was out picking, and my next guy would be Henry Ellard for the era. And yeah, we didn't put up sick numbers like the Greatest Show on Turf, but for our day and age, we were pretty advanced. And I'm saying, well, the kid was automatic, and he was so good. And, for him not to be in the Hall of Fame, and I look at it and go like, I don't know what the bar is for that, but that is definitely one person that needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
I couldn't agree with you more. Ellard, even as a fan of the Saints, watching you tear it up with Ellard and Anderson was frankly a nightmare. Pleasure to watch you do it to other teams, but I didn't like you as much when you did it to us.
No, it's never a good thing. But I could look back on it too. You have experiences. I had some in Los Angeles. I had some of my best life experiences in New Orleans, and I really did. And that's when I look back on it and go, having a chance to be with Quinn Early, Jim Dombrowski, Willie Roaf, those relationships and those times that we had with Coach Mora and the whole thing was just life-changing for me. I know my Catholicism increased as far as belief, and, you kind of get knocked off your high horse a little bit. But when you're trading for a 7th round pick, I think you go and tuck your ego in your sock. But it is what it is. But I'd say that I just love the people there. I love my time there, and I love the Saints. And the fact that seeing my Purdue quarterback Drew Brees plays there makes it just so much more at home for me.
Hey, you guys, before I let you go, and I know you only got a couple more minutes. But speaking of that Purdue lineage of quarterbacks, obviously there was Brees. I think people discount what Kyle Wharton did, not only at Purdue but in the league, and certainly yourself. But and you mentioned him earlier in the show. One of the guys that you really watched growing up played a really instrumental part in getting you to Purdue. Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about that?
All right. So when I went on a recruiting trip to Purdue, and matter of fact, when I went to high school in El Dorado, which is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, our English teacher was a Purdue grad. She ended up becoming the head of the John Purdue Club later. But she was like, you need to get this kid out of be a Boilermaker. So she was instrumental. Her name was Wona Deverman. But when I went on my recruiting trip, and Jim Young, who was a mastermind offense. When I think of Purdue, I think of astronauts and sophisticated offenses. And I think that's what Brom brings to the Purdue nation right now is an offense, and Jake Palmer's running that offense over there. So it's fun to watch. Anyways, when I went to I saw an IU Purdue basketball game, which was one of the biggest rivalries in the state of Indiana. And at halftime, they honored the Purdue great quarterbacks. And in that group of guys was a guy named Lynn Dawson. Being that I was born in Emporia, Kansas, and he was a Kansas City Chief in 1969, Super Bowl champion, was sitting with me at breakfast the next morning having full discussions about everything. And Lynn Dawson is such a good communicator. And when I was done with that, I was like, I'm going here. And, he even signed my high school picture. I still have it framed. So that to me was, having a boy time idol and have a chance to pick which university and know that he went there, just meant the world to me. So yeah, it had a lot to do with, hopefully those are all legal recruiting stories, but it was sure, there was no money exchanging hands, but it was certainly a highlight of my life, and it was fun to represent.
Did you get a chance to go back often?
I don't. I haven't been back much since Coach Brom took over. I need to get back. I've actually been having back issues that doesn't allow me to travel too much. But I think that's one of the things about sports is you give it all on the field, and then when you get a little bit older, you gotta take your lumps when they come, because I don't know. It's like dog years of aging for your body playing out on the field, and you can only imagine. But anyways, I wouldn't have changed a thing. But I have a couple limitations that I have as far as travel.
Well, we certainly wish you continued good health, and on behalf of every New Orleans Saint fan, and for that matter, every Los Angeles Ram fan, thank you, Jim Everett, for everything that you've done on the field during your playing days and in your community and your former NFL city since. You mean so much to us.
Well, thanks, Bob. I know this. It hadn't affected my fingers when I'm sitting there typing on Twitter. So if you want a fun follow, join me on Twitter, Jim _Everett. and take it with a grain of salt. But we usually have a lot of fun, and I see you on there a lot, Bob. So I don't know how many people follow us on Twitter, but if you continue to haze me like this, I'm just going to have to turn the ship around on you, Bob.
It's not my fault. I enjoy posting the old college pictures of you guys. Your Purdue team's just got to get healthy so they start knocking these guys off.
Yeah, I know, it's so fun. That whole format, and I really wish getting in the whole Twitter world. I sure wish we would have had that one. Our playing days, and we had to speak through reporters, and then the reporters had to interpret what we were trying to say into the paper, and it didn't always translate word for word. So now I just love the fact that we can hear, maybe not as much from Antonio Brown, but from the rest of the guys, what's going on in their lives and the whole deal.
And Irv Smith, I know you're probably listening. I'll steal Mr. Everett's phrase and fleck Michigan this weekend.
Yeah, feck 'em. If you're on Twitter, you know exactly what we're talking about. If you're not, we're just Irish.
If you're not, you're missing all the fun. And Jim, like I said, I know you got to get flying. I appreciate you taking a few minutes out with us. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Bob, let's do it. Who dat?
Who dat?
All right, talk to you soon.
Take care, Jim. Thank you. That's Jim Everett, folks.
Bob, you still there? Thanks, buddy.